It's incredible when you think of all the money that these young athletes are generating for the schools, and the schools are saying, okay, here you go, you get a $50,000 or $60,000 scholarship, and basically that's it. What's wrong with this system?
Well, one thing that's wrong with the system, as we describe in our cover story in Bloomberg Business Week, is that some of the schools, some of the times, aren't even keeping the deal that they have on the table, which is to say they may offer the scholarship, but an education is supposed to come along with that scholarship. And as has been seen at the University of North Carolina, one of our great public universities, that education is sometimes an empty promise. At UNC, basketball and football players were channeled into fake classes, right? Classes that didn't even meet. Yeah. Well, and you know, so this is the problem.
You look at some big schools, like Syracuse, and only 40% of the kids there are actually graduating in the basketball program. And to your point, sometimes they're trying to make it easier because they're putting them in classes where they know they're going to get an A.
Exactly. I mean, Craig, let me ask you. I mean, it's not even if they're graduating. A lot of times, these students are not allowed to major in business or some of the other schools that they want to keep high up in the rankings. Varsity athletes are made to take, you know, visual arts, so basically watching TV. Do you hear this from athletes that are out there that they just didn't get to take advantage enough of their educational opportunities in college?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I think when you talk about graduation rates of schools like North Carolina, specifically for the sport of basketball, you also have to take into account that if a kid leaves school after a sophomore year, that counts towards the graduation rate. So the numbers that you come up with
I'm sorry,
are not
back
actual
up, Craig.
numbers
So
of
that
kids
counts
are graduating.
as graduation? That actually counts as someone that's graduated?
No, it doesn't. My point is,
doesn't.
When you look at graduation numbers for some of the schools, and obviously there's more than 200 Division I schools, and clearly 1,000 colleges across America, Division I, Division II, AA, all that. When you take North Carolina as your prime example and use solely the basketball or the football program, and you don't take into account the fact that they might have 4 or 5 kids out of 12 over the course of 2 years that leave school early to go play pro basketball, well, you're not giving a legitimate graduation number because those kids went and they're earning a living.
But that's not,
so
you know, the graduation
numbers are different.
The graduation stats don't really, I mean, that's not really the point. And what you're saying is true. A lot of college basketball players are going to go out early. If you look at Paul, if you look at Paul, for example, Notre Dame, the African American athletes that are varsity football players, 95% of them are majoring in the School of Visual Arts. Why is that? How come they're not majoring in business? How come they're not allowed to pursue other programs and they essentially are watching movies for 4 years?
Well, I think that the Notre Dame folks would take great offense to that. I don't think that anyone has ever said that a college athlete is specifically not allowed to take a specific course. Now, listen, I'm not naive enough to think that there are a number of colleges and hundreds of athletes that are,
but they're incentivized, right? They're incentivized to make sure that these kids graduate, Paul, because otherwise they're going to be dealing with a graduation rate that is going to make it pretty hard to get new recruits.
It depends. You guys have to remember there's 17 different aspects of this story to talk about. And now, graduation rates, I don't think, should be one of them. If you want to talk about the amount of revenue that's raised by the NCAA...
let's move on, actually, because this is a big part of Paul's story as well. I mean, you think about all the money that's being generated, and you know, CBS basically is paying all this money for the rights to NCAA March Madness. That money then goes to the schools, or rather, the NCAA, then to the schools, then to the coaches. But Paul Barrett, it doesn't go to the players. Is there a flaw in this system in that these are kids that they're not just full-time students, they are full-time athletes, and they are making money, big money for these schools?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually personally agnostic on that question. I think that a lot of universities and a lot of alumni at a lot of universities do want to have programs, and in a lot of sports, having those programs, you know, based on scholarships and education in exchange for 4 years of service on the field is fine. But the problem is, and what I wrote about at North Carolina, is that when the education is counterfeit, the graduation rates don't matter if the classes themselves are a fraud. And I think that's a starting place.
Let me go over to Craig
a starting place is that the classes have to be real.
Yeah, Craig, should players be getting paid for their time at school?
No, because are you going to pay the swimmer and the gymnast as much as you're paying the basketball players?
No, probably not. Probably not, because they're not going to generate as much money for
Why
the
would
school.
you?
All right. Listen, there's no easy answer to whether or not college athletes should be paid. I think the story that Paul wrote, and to be fair, I've not read it, but just based on the comments you're saying, you're taking a microcosm of the sport and making it a pandemic problem across the board with every university and every sport and every director of athletics and every provost of a school, which is patently wrong. If you talk about athletes being paid, everyone talks about the kid that comes out of college early and might make a boatload of money playing basketball or football. Those kids represent 1/1000th of all the kids that play varsity sports in college.
About 2% at Division I schools.
Yeah.
Not even close to 2%.
Craig, I know that you were talking with one of our producers, and you came up with an idea that, we were talking about this morning in our meeting that we actually thought made a whole lot of sense. You said, that these schools are making so much money off of licensing the likeness or the, the numbers or the jerseys of various players. Why not kick back some of that money to the actual player himself?
Well, I view it this way. I think that if you take the Division I athletes who have a chance of, they're participating in sport, which is actually a professional organization, that would be their bank job, their lawyer job, whatever it might be, whatever their chosen profession is, and you incentivize them to stay in school. Very few college athletes actually make it to the pro level. So when you say to kids like this, you want to find a way to take that money that they're earning, that they're putting in college's pockets, putting in the NCAA's pockets, you come up with a plan where you say, listen, we'll give you 5 years to graduate college. When you graduate college, if you do within 5 years, you get a lump sum amount of money. I don't know what a fair number would be, but you incentivize them to stay in school. The kids that are legitimate Division I prospects to make it to the pros and they're going to make money, those kids aren't staying in school no matter what you do for them, because the allure of making a minimum of $500,000, $1 million is too great.
And they should, right? I mean, because
of course
the reality is, otherwise you run the risk that, you play 2 years in college, you bust your knee, and it's game over.
Right.
So if you got a shot at making that money, why not take it? Because, Paul, back to your original point, you're not getting much of an education. Craig?
If I'm the smartest kid at the University of Pennsylvania, and I've got a million companies coming to me because I can take my MBA in my sophomore year and pass it, and I can help a company, A, I've got the right to leave school to go work for a company. B, there's going to be 20 companies lined up to come get me. Yeah. So what's the difference?
Yeah. Hey, all right. All makes sense. This is market-driven like anything else.